Oh, hi. There's a couple of really important things to consider now when looking at rent trends. One of them is the impact of new construction, now that we're seeing a lot more new construction in the marketplace. And the other one is the impact of inflation. Even though inflation is low, it still has an impact on how we should think about rent trends. So first, let's look at the impact of new construction on rents. In King County, in the last 12 months, the average rent in the market went up by 7.5%. So that just takes all the properties in the market we surveyed last year, looks at that rent, compares it to the rent today, it's up 7.5%. But in the past year, we've added a number of new properties, new construction that has begun lease up, and new properties typically rent for more. They're new, they have more amenities and features, and so they get a higher rent. So if you exclude the properties built this year and last year and look at what happened to rents over the last 12 months, you can see they didn't go up quite as much. They went up 5.9%. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still a large rent increase. It's not bad at all. Nothing to be worried about. But rents really didn't go up 7.5% for the average property. That 7.5% got inflated because of the addition of new construction. So over the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot more new properties begin lease up. And so new construction is going to have an even larger impact on what happens to rent change than we've seen in the last 12 months. So it's just something to be careful about when you look at these kinds of trends. Now, we can go back over a much longer period of time and see the same thing happening. In this case, we went back to 1969. In 1969, the average King County apartment rented for about $146 a month. And today that number's over $1,220 a month. But since 1969, we've added a lot of new apartment properties in the market, and typically new construction has more amenities and features than older properties. Plus, a lot of those older properties got significant renovation over the last number of years, adding some of the features that newer construction has so that they could compete more effectively. So we're really making an apples and oranges comparison. If you kick out the properties built after 1969, you can see that rent still increased significantly, but only up to about $1,000 a month instead of well over $1,200 a month. Now that's still a lot, but also keep in mind that that does include some inflationary upward trend as a result of renovation, where older properties have put in hard surfaces like granite countertops or plank flooring or washers and dryers to compete with the newer construction. But still, you can see that the addition of new construction each year has a huge impact. And so it's just something to be really cautious about over the next few years with the addition of all the new units that we expect to open. The next thing to look at is the impact of inflation. Now, you can see that these rent increases are pretty significant. Overall, the total market going from $146 to over $1,200 a month, that's more than an 8-fold increase in rents. Even kicking out the newer product, you're still looking at about a 7-fold increase in rents over that period of time. That's tremendous. So you say, wow, rents have really climbed very dramatically. What a great investment apartments are. And don't get me wrong, we do think apartments are a good investment, but you also have to put these numbers in their proper perspective. Inflation has an impact. So if you look at the dotted blue line in this chart, you can see that the dotted blue line shows the overall rent trend for all properties. So we're adding in newer properties in most years. And it shows that during the early 70s, rents went down. We had the Boeing bust then. Then rents climbed, and you can see a series of ups and downs that rents took over these years. Now, that line is adjusted for inflation. So today, rents overall in King County are about 25% higher than they were in 1969, adjusted for inflation. So although rents did go up 8-fold, they really only went up 25% adjusted for inflation. Then if you look at the red line takes out all of the properties built after 1969. So those newer properties, do have an inflationary impact of their own on what happens to rents. Now, we didn't have year-by-year rent data for that particular age group, but we had it, after 1995. So we just did a straight line from the $146 in 1969 to what rents were for that age group in the mid-1990s. And then we show the trend after that. You can see the same general ups and downs, but basically those rents don't remotely approach what happened to sort of the total market average. So properties built before 1970 rent for only about 5% more today than they did back in 1969 once you adjust for inflation. And you can see that in the last year or two that rents have been climbing pretty rapidly, making up for losses after 2008. So we always go through these peaks and troughs, and that will likely happen again in the future. Now, this inflation trend is important for another reason. Rents, basically, it shows, keep pace with inflation. Sometimes they do a little bit better, sometimes they don't even do as well. And that's important because operating expenses have climbed more than rents. Now, we don't have operating expense data going back to the late 1960s. This only looks at the last dozen years. In the last dozen years, King County rents climbed 41%, but operating expenses climbed 47%. So expenses have been climbing faster than rents. So it's really critical to have a real focus on operating expenses. Now, two key culprits in the expense increase are real estate taxes and utilities. Those have climbed a lot faster than operating expenses overall and very much faster than rents. We've talked in past articles about how to manage and control real estate taxes and utility costs, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in future videos as well. But anyway, keep in mind these two impacts on rent trends. One is the addition of a lot of new units in the next couple of years is going to distort the rent increase trend that we see in the market. And the other one is whenever you're looking at a historical dollar number compared to today's dollar number, you really do need to adjust for inflation. And I guess thirdly, because of all of this, you really need to focus on managing operating expenses, and here are two key culprits. I hope that you enjoyed this week's video, and you'll come back next week for another weekly apartment update.